Welcome! Today, we're focusing on a critical skill for managing client relationships, navigating complex stakeholders. Whether it's aligning goals, handling gatekeepers, or building consensus, I'll share practical strategies to help you succeed. Ever felt like you're playing chess with a dozen opponents in a single client organization? That's what it can feel like managing complex stakeholders. But here's the key. Success doesn't come from outsmarting them. It comes from aligning with them. Even in the most complex dynamics, there's always a way to bring clarity and collaboration to the table. And that's exactly what we will be talking about today. Why does building alignment matter? Here's the deal. When your client's team is pulling in the same direction, things move smoothly. And when you're the one steering that alignment, they'll see you as their trusted advisor. They'll come back for new projects, invite you into bigger conversations, and even be happy to provide references. You're not just solving today's issues or preventing conflicts, you're laying the groundwork for tomorrow's opportunities. Let's look at the approaches we'll explore today. First, we'll dive into stakeholder mapping, how to identify key players and make sure you're focusing your efforts in the right places. Next, we'll explore preemptive trade-offs and risk reframing, where we will talk about techniques to address competing priorities early and frame potential concerns as opportunities for collaboration. It's all about keeping things smooth and conflict-free. Finally, we will look into bridge narratives and visualization, techniques to align diverse goals into one shared vision and make everything crystal clear for everyone involved. These are practical, actionable strategies that you can start using immediately. Let's start with stakeholder mapping. You're already meeting with your clients regularly, so the question isn't whether you know your main contacts, it's whether you know everyone you should. First, start with this question. Who else in this organization quietly shapes decisions? Here's a simple trick. Check the CC line in emails. Those names are often people who aren't in your regular meetings but are looped in for a reason. They influence decisions behind the scenes. Want to build alignment? Start with a quick, informal one-on-one. Hey, I noticed you're part of these conversations. Would love to hear your perspective. It's low pressure, and it gets you on their radar. Next, ask, what do they care about now, and how has it changed? Priorities shift quickly, especially in tech. Pay attention to subtle signals. Who is being mentioned in conversations, new challenges they bring up, or changes in tone around KPIs? And don't hesitate to ask directly, what's been keeping you and your team up at night lately? Finally, think about, how can I build trust without overcomplicating things? Trust doesn't always come from big gestures. For existing clients, it's often about small wins. Maybe it's proactively solving an issue they didn't know existed, or giving them something useful, like a quick insight or benchmarking data, without expecting anything in return. And sometimes, just being straightforward, here's how I think this could make your life easier, goes a long way. Trust grows faster when you're seen as low maintenance but high value. Now that we've talked about mapping stakeholders, let's move on to preemptive trade-offs and risk reframing. This is where things can get tricky, balancing competing priorities and addressing concerns before they turn into roadblocks. And to help us dive deeper into this, I've brought in someone who knows this game inside and out. Frank, welcome. I can't wait to hear your perspective on how to navigate these situations.
Glad to be here.
Frank, navigating complex stakeholders often feels like juggling a dozen priorities at once. But let's talk strategy, specifically preemptive trade-offs. These can make a huge difference in keeping things on track, right?
Absolutely. Preemptive trade-offs are about identifying friction points early and addressing them before they become problems. For example, I will say, I know speed is important, but let's also talk about how we ensure long-term sustainability. The key is framing them as a shared problem-solving exercise.
So it's not about predicting doom and gloom, it's about bringing clarity to the table. Any specific tips for balancing trade-offs without upsetting stakeholders?
One thing I found helpful is using decision previews. Instead of locking into a choice, you say something like, we're thinking of focusing on this feature first, which might mean delaying another deliverable. Does that align with your priorities? This invites feedback while signaling you're already weighing trade-offs. It's collaborative and prevents surprises.
That's brilliant. What about when stakeholders aren't fully aligned? How do you navigate that?
That's where split gains framing comes in. This is about finding small wins for each side while keeping the bigger goal intact. For example, we can deliver the core functionality you need now and phase in the additional features IT wants in the next cycle.
I like the idea to balance short-term wins with long-term alignment so that no one feels like they're losing out completely. Let's shift gears to reframing risks. What about when stakeholders are resistant to any kind of trade-off? How do you handle that?
That's where reframe the stakes becomes crucial. Resistance usually comes from focusing on what they might lose. I'll flip the conversation to highlight what they stand to gain. For instance, I might say, by prioritizing scalability now, we can avoid doubling costs when your growth spikes later. It's about helping them see the trade-off as an investment, not a compromise.
That's a great approach, shifting the focus from loss to opportunity. But what if someone is still stuck on their concerns and won't move forward?
In that case, I use what I call the anchored pivot. It's a two-step process. First, anchor to their concern. Acknowledge it in specific terms. For example, I understand that downtime is a big concern for your team right now. Then, pivot to the bigger perspective. But if we address this integration now, it will prevent far larger disruptions down the road. By validating their concern and reframing it in the context of long-term goals, you can often break through the resistance.
That's practical and empathetic. It respects their perspective while encouraging action. What else can viewers do to keep things aligned?
Always tie decisions back to the bigger picture. I'll often say, this isn't about one team's win, it's about what's best for the organization as a whole. Keeping the overarching goal visible reminds everyone that we're all on the same team.
Fantastic advice. Thanks, Frank. Let's talk about the bridge narrative. Picture this. You're standing on one side of a river and your client, well, not just your client, but multiple stakeholders are on the other. Between you, there's no clear path. Just swirling water, competing priorities, internal politics, and maybe even a few sharp rocks of resistance. The challenge? You're not just guiding one person across. You're managing multiple viewpoints, priorities, and potential conflicts. The bridge narrative is your way of building that connection, plank by plank, so your stakeholders can confidently walk across together, aligned toward a shared outcome. The bridge narrative only works if it's about them, not you. And the easiest way to build it? Think in three parts. First, before. What's their current reality? The challenges, frustrations, or risks they're dealing with right now. Next, bridge. How does your solution connect the dots? This is where you align priorities, remove friction, and make the path forward clear. And finally, after. What's the outcome? Not just the business result, but what it means for them. Less risk, smoother operations, or even career wins. When you structure it this way, you're guiding them through a story where they can see themselves moving forward. Bottom line, if the bridge feels uncertain, they won't cross it. Make the bridge something they actually want to cross. Now, creating a great bridge narrative is one thing, but bringing it to life? That's where visualization can make all the difference. And for that, I'm bringing back Frank to share some of his favorite techniques. Frank, when working with existing clients, we're not just pitching ideas, we're navigating internal politics, shifting priorities, and sometimes competing agendas. How do you use the bridge narrative to keep everyone aligned?
The bridge narrative is such a powerful tool because it's not just about connecting steps. It's about creating a story that stakeholders can see themselves in. In ongoing client relationships, alignment isn't automatic. You have to make it easy for them to picture the outcome and how they get there. One thing I always emphasize is the importance of making it visual. When I walk a client's team through a proposed change, I don't just say, "This will improve efficiency." I show them how it unfolds. For example, instead of saying, "This solution optimizes workflows," I might say, "Imagine 6 months from now, your team isn't buried in manual approvals anymore. Instead of chasing data across multiple systems, they're focusing on strategic initiatives. That means fewer fire drills for you and smoother operations across the board." Now, they're not just hearing numbers or business outcomes. They're seeing what their day-to-day reality could look like.
That's a great example, painting a picture of success in a way that actually matters to them. But what about when the audience isn't as engaged? Some stakeholders don't respond to abstract benefits. How do you make it stick?
That's when I use relatable analogies that tie into their world. People don't always connect with metrics, but they connect with familiar experiences. For instance, if I'm working with an IT leader who's hesitant about a new system, I might say, think of this like upgrading from a paper map to GPS. Right now, your team is navigating blind, relying on experience and gut feeling. But with this system, you'll have a real-time dashboard, guiding you efficiently without wasted detours. If I'm talking to a finance team, I'll frame it differently. This isn't just an expense. It's like swapping out an old gas-guzzling car for an energy-efficient model. You're investing up front, but over time, you save more than you spend. People remember stories and comparisons way more than they remember a slide deck full of bullet points.
That makes a lot of sense. Anchoring the story in their reality makes it real for them. What about when you're dealing with skeptical stakeholders? Maybe there's someone in the room who's not aligned with team's vision and have their own political reasons to resist the change.
That's when I rely on layered visualization. Skeptics don't usually buy into a vision right away, so instead of dumping everything on them at once, I break it down into steps they can digest. I'll say something like, Step 1, we address X pain point without disrupting your team. Step 2, we roll in small phases that fit your current workflow, no major disruptions. Step 3, we're now operating at full scale, but with measurable improvements to efficiency and collaboration. By layering the story, you reduce the feeling of risk and overwhelm.
That's such a practical approach. Big picture first, then breaking it down into tangible steps. So visualization isn't just about showing them where they'll end up. It's about helping them see how they'll get there without the friction.
Exactly. And one last tip, never underestimate the power of a shared metaphor. If a team feels divided, I might say, right now it feels like different teams are pulling in opposite directions. What we're building is more like a rowing team. If we get aligned, we'll move faster and with less effort. People don't always remember numbers, but they remember metaphors. When they can see themselves as part of the journey, alignment happens naturally.
That's very helpful, Frank. Visualization, layered steps, and relatable metaphors. These are powerful tools for shaping conversations and strengthening client relationships. Thanks for sharing your insights. All right, let's bring it all together. If there's one thing to remember when managing complex stakeholders, it's this: clarity beats complexity. Competing priorities, internal politics, and hidden agendas can make alignment feel impossible. The key? Make it simple, make it visual, and make it relevant. When stakeholders can see a clear, logical next step, one that speaks to their priorities, they're far more likely to align. So, next time you find yourself navigating a complex client conversation, ask yourself, am I making it easier for them to say yes? Because in the end, clarity wins. Always.